The rain had been hammering the windows of St. Clara's Hospital since dusk, as if trying to shatter the glass. I, Nina Hall, 29 years old and an ICU nurse, had been working the night shift at this old hospital on the city's edge for 4 years. There's always a strange feeling between 3 and 4 a.m. when the hallways go quiet, the machines hum under fluorescent lights, and time seems to freeze. It's like the hospital holds its breath. Tonight, though, that feeling was a weight on my chest. It was a Tuesday night, a seemingly calm shift. Only a few patients were in the ward, and the steady beeps of the monitors played like a monotonous lullaby in the background. Around 3:15 a.m., an emergency bell pierced the silence, sharp, relentless, and grating. It was coming from room 509. My heart skipped a beat. That room had been empty for 2 weeks. The last patient, an elderly man named Mr. Riddler with a severe stroke, had died in that bed. His file was still burned in my mind, his eyes staring at the ceiling until the end, as if he saw something up there. I got up from a nurse's station, grabbed my small flashlight, and headed toward room 509. The hallway was cold, and the smell of antiseptic was laced with something else, a damp, earthy scent, like a wet basement. The door was ajar, and moonlight spilled through the rain-streaked window, casting trembling shadows on the empty bed. The bell was still ringing, as if someone was frantically pressing the button. I stepped inside. The bed was neatly made, sheets flat, machines off. No one was there. But the bell, with its shrill, jarring tone, wouldn't stop. I reached for the device by the bed and yanked its cord from the outlet. The sound cut off abruptly, and the silence hit me like a hammer. I returned to the station, but my heart was still racing. I told myself it was probably a technical glitch. This hospital was old, full of frayed wiring and outdated equipment. I sat at the desk, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something in the hallway was watching me. Half an hour later, the bell from room 509 rang again. My skin prickled. I stood up and practically ran to the room. The door was still ajar, but this time, something was even stranger. The bell device was off. The cord was still unplugged. Yet, on the monitor by the bed, vital signs were pulsing. Heart rate, respiration, blood pressure. It was as if a real patient was there. The heart rate was fast, like someone panting in fear. I shone my flashlight on the bed. Nothing. But my shadow on the wall seemed to bend for a moment, as if someone was standing behind me. I spun around. The hallway was empty. I unplugged the monitor, and its screen went dark. But just before the light faded completely, I swear I saw a shape flash on the display. A vague shadow, like a face staring right at you, up close. My breath caught. I bolted out of the room and slammed the door shut. The bell didn't ring again that shift, but at 5 a.m., as I was packing up, I heard a faint sound, a whisper, like breathing through a thin wall. It was coming from the hallway, right from room 509. I didn't dare look. I grabbed my bag and nearly ran to the parking lot. The rain was still pouring, and when I got into my car, I felt the back seat creak for a moment, as if someone sat down. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Nothing, but that damp, earthy smell lingered in the car. The next night, when I returned from my shift, one of the veteran nurses, Margaret, told me something odd. Years ago, room 509 had a strange patient, a young woman admitted after a horrific car accident. Margaret said she'd ring the bell every night, saying, "Someone's in my room." But whenever the nurses checked, no one was there. One night, the woman vanished. Not discharged, not deceased, just gone. Since then, the bell in room 509 would ring for no reason every so often. Margaret gave a nervous smile and said, "Nina, you'd better steer clear of that room." Something stayed. Since that night, every time I pass room 509, I feel a shadow lying on the bed, a vague shape with eyes that seem to glint in the dark. Sometimes when the hallway's empty, I hear the whisper again, soft, like a wet breath calling my name. Worst of all, one night at the nurse's station, the monitor flickered on and showed those same vital signs: heart rate, respiration, pressure. But this time, a name appeared on the screen: Nina Hall. My hands went cold. I shut off the monitor, but I still feel like whatever's in room 509, whatever it is calling me. Now, every shift, I keep a scrap of paper in my pocket that says, "Don't look at 509. But sometimes, when the rain pounds the windows, I feel a cold hand brush my shoulder, and a whisper in my ear says, "Come inside." I haven't gone in, but I don't know how much longer I can resist. The rain had been pounding the cracked windows of Willowcrest Hospital since dusk, as if it wanted to force its way into the old building. I, Thompson, 32 years old and an operating room technician, had been working in the surgical wing on the lower floor for 3 years. This place is strange, always cold, even in summer, and the smell of antiseptic mixes with something else, a damp, metallic scent like old blood. Everyone knows the surgical wing is ancient, full of narrow corridors and rusted equipment. But there's one room, number 12, that nobody talks about. Its door is always locked, and we were told the ventilation system is broken, so it's been sealed off for years. Still, I always felt like that door was watching me. One night, after a grueling surgery that dragged past midnight, I was packing up my gear when I heard a faint sound, like a hushed conversation between two people, a woman and a man, short and secretive, as if they didn't want to be overheard. The sound came from the end of the corridor, right from room 12. My skin prickled. The hallway was empty, and the fluorescent lights flickered in an annoying rhythm. My steps squeaked on the linoleum floor, inexplicably wet, though I couldn't tell from where. When I reached room 12's door, the voices grew clearer. The woman said, "We have to finish it," and the man replied, "It's too soon." My heart raced. I placed my hand on the doorknob. It was locked as always, but a faint, cold blue light, trembling and unsteady, seeped from under the door, like a broken bulb flickering inside. I turned on my phone's flashlight and aimed it through the gap under the door. All I saw was dust and a filthy white scrap, like an old surgical gauze. But when I pressed my ear to the door, the voices stopped, and then I heard a deep, wet breath like someone gasping for air underwater, right on the other side. I jumped back. The blue light pulsed brighter for a moment, and the shadow of two hands, with unnaturally long fingers, stretched across the opposite wall. My breath caught. I ran to the stairs and didn't stop until I reached the technician station upstairs. I didn't go back down that night. The next morning, I told my supervisor, Ms. Carter, what I'd heard. She frowned and said in a cold tone, "We don't have a room 12, Thompson. The surgical wing only has 11 operating rooms. You're exhausted, taking too many shifts." I thought she was joking. I went back downstairs to show her. But when I got to the corridor, my heart sank. The number 12 was gone from the door. Only the faded outline of old yellow tape and a faint trace of the digit 2 remained on the wall, as if someone had hastily painted over it. The door was still locked, but no light came from underneath. I called Carter to come see, but when she arrived, she just shook her head and said, "Look, this corridor's always been like this. You're imagining things." But her eyes avoided mine. That same night, one of the old security guards, Mr. Fletcher, pulled me aside and whispered, "If you saw room 12, don't go back there." I asked why. With a strange look, he said years ago, a botched surgery happened in that room. A young woman who woke up during the operation but couldn't move because the anesthesia didn't fully work. Fletcher said, "She never left that room. Nurses said they heard her voice in the corridor afterward, begging." After that, the hospital locked the room and even erased it from the blueprints. Fletcher added, "But some nights, it's like she's still there, with someone else." His voice trembled, and when I tried to ask more, he just walked away. Since that night, Every time I'm on a surgical wing shift, I feel like the corridor is playing tricks on me. Sometimes, I hear the creak of an old gurney's wheels from the end of the hallway, but there's no gurney there. Sometimes, the metallic, damp smell gets stronger, and a wet patch seems to spread on the floor, with no leak to explain it. Worst of all, the blue light has reappeared. Not every night, but some nights, when I'm alone, it flickers from under that locked door. Once, I mustered the courage to slide my phone under the door to record. When I checked the footage, it was just darkness, but a wet, rasping breath and a faint whisper were recorded in the background. You shouldn't be here. Now, every night I pass that spot in the corridor, I feel someone watching me from behind the door, a shadow with long fingers, as if scratching at the wood. One night, while packing up, I found an old surgical gauze on my desk, soaked and stained, with a sharp metallic stench. I'm certain it wasn't there when I started my shift. Worst of all, a few nights ago, as I passed the corridor, the door to room 12 was ajar for a split second. In the darkness, two pairs of icy blue eyes stared at me, one pleading, one seething with rage. I blinked, and the door was closed, as if it had never opened. I don't dare go near that part of the corridor alone anymore. But every night, when the rain hammers the windows, I feel that blue light growing stronger, and the whispers are starting to call my name. I don't know who or what they are. All I know is that room 12 shouldn't exist, but it does. The rain had been pouring on the windows of Ridgeview Hospital since I came to, as if the world wanted to drown itself. Alice Carter, 27 years old, was admitted to room 314 after an emergency appendectomy. The room was small, with pale walls and an antiseptic smell that couldn't mask a faint, sweet rot lingering underneath. My bed was by the window, and another bed, just across the room, was hidden behind a green plastic curtain. From the moment I opened my eyes, I felt something wasn't right in that room. Maybe it was the anesthesia, maybe the heavy silence of the hospital, but the air was thick with an uneasy anticipation. On the second night, as moonlight slid through the rain-streaked window, I noticed a shadow. Behind the green curtain, a vague shape moved, a hunched head, sloped shoulders, as if someone was sitting on the bed, swaying gently. I thought it was my roommate, another patient recovering like me. But something was off. There was no sound from them. No cough, no snore, not even the rustle of a magazine. Just every now and then, a faint wheeze, like the breathing of someone with waterlogged lungs, cutting through the room's silence. Once, I heard a tapping, like long nails clicking against the metal bed rail. I tried to convince myself it was normal, but deep down, a gnawing fear was taking root. On the third day, when a nurse came to check my floor, I asked, "What's my roommate's name? They're so quiet." The nurse, a middle-aged woman with gray hair named Linda, paused. Her eyes held a strange shadow, like she was swallowing something she didn't want to say. Then, with a tight smile, she said, "You're alone in here, sweetie. That bed's empty." My heart stuttered. I said, "But I saw their shadow. I heard noises." Linda just shrugged and said, "Hospitals are full of sounds at night. Meds can mess with your head, too." But as she left, I saw her glance at the green curtain, as if making sure nothing was there. That night, the sound got worse. The wheezing breaths grew louder, now mixed with a vague murmur, broken words, like an old prayer mumbled under someone's breath. Around midnight, I jolted awake, feeling someone breathing right near my face. Their breath was cold, damp, and reeked of sweet decay, like flowers rotting in a vase. I opened my eyes, but there was nothing, just darkness and the shadow of the green curtain. My heart pounded. I flicked on the bed's overhead light, but it only reached halfway across the room. The curtain twitched, as if an invisible breeze had brushed it. I didn't dare get up to look. In the morning, I decided to find out the truth. I set my phone to time-lapse mode, aimed the camera at the second bed, and hit record. All day, whenever nurses came in, I watched the curtain. No one went near it. It was like that bed didn't exist for them. When dusk fell and I was alone in the room, I checked the footage. My hair stood on end. The green curtain had moved aside several times, gently, as if someone was cautiously peeking out. Nothing was visible. No person, no object, but a black shadow, with a hunched head and sloped shoulders, sat right on the edge of the bed. For hours, motionless, it just stared toward my bed. Worst of all, at one point, the shadow seemed to tilt its head slightly, as if listening to something only it could hear. On the fourth night, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to see what was behind the curtain. My hand shook, but I got up, grabbed the crutch by my bed, and shuffled toward the curtain. My heart thumped in my ears. The wheezing was closer now, mixed with another sound, a soft scraping, like long nails dragging across fabric. I reached out to pull the curtain aside, but then I felt something cold graze my finger, like an icy digit wrapping around my wrist. I stumbled back. The curtain didn't move, but the shadow behind it now seemed taller, as if it wasn't sitting anymore. It was standing. The murmurs grew clearer. You mustn't. And then, another word, almost my name, Alice. I ran to the door and hit the nurse call button. When Linda came, I sobbed. There's someone there. They call my name. Linda stared at the curtain with an odd look, but only said, "Calm down, sweetie. There's no one here." But as she checked my four, she muttered under her breath, "Sometimes it's better not to know." Before I could ask what she meant, she was gone. On the fifth day, I was discharged. As I packed my things, a heavy presence filled the room, like someone was watching me up close. The green curtain was still there, but the shadow no longer moved, just sat, rigid and still, like a black statue. As I left the room, I saw an old woman in a wheelchair in the hallway. Her hair was white, and her eyes looked like they'd seen nothing but hospital walls for years. She called to me softly and said, "They always think they're alone, but it's still there. It never leaves its bed, ever." Her voice trembled, and when I tried to respond, she wheeled away and vanished down the corridor. When I got home from the hospital, I thought it was over. It wasn't. On nights when the rain falls, I still hear that wheezing breath, soft, from a corner of my room. Sometimes, when the lights are off, I feel a hunched shadow sitting by my bed, just staring. Worst of all, one night in my bedrock mirror, I saw something behind me for a split second. A black, faceless shape with long fingers reaching toward me. I blinked and it was gone, but I still feel it. Whatever it was, followed me from room 314. And I don't know why, but it's waiting for something, waiting for me. The rain was coming down like a wall against the windows of Hillside Hospital's emergency department, as if it wanted to shatter the glass. Jessica, 30 years old and the night shift receptionist in the ER, sat behind the counter, the sound of thunder echoing in my ears. It was around 1 a.m., and the waiting area was emptier than ever. Not a single walk-in patient in sight, just the tap-tap of my keyboard and the howling wind in the hospital corridors. I was sorting through intake forms when a strange feeling hit me, like someone was watching me from a dark corner. I looked up. No one was there, just my own shadow on the wall, trembling under the fluorescent lights. Then, the entrance door opened with a soft creak. A girl about 13 or 14 years old, soaked to the bone, stepped inside quietly. Her black hair was long, plastered to her face, and her clothes, a simple white blouse and jeans, were caked with mud. But what made my heart race was her eerie calm. She wasn't shivering, wasn't in a hurry. She just stood there, with eyes that seemed to hold nothing at their core, staring at me. Her shoes were drenched, but the floor beneath her was bone dry. No footprints, no drops of water. She walked slowly to the counter and stopped. Her voice was soft, but it carried a chilling coldness that made my skin crawl. My mom told me to find a doctor. She's outside, waiting for me. Her words sounded distant, like someone talking to you in a dream. I asked, "What's your name, sweetie? Where's your mom?" She paused, as if trying to recall something she wasn't supposed to forget. Then she said, "I don't know. I can't remember." Her eyes locked onto mine, but her gaze seemed to pass through me, as if she was looking at something else, something behind me. I quickly called the shift nurse, Sarah, to come process her. When I put the phone down, the girl was still there, but she seemed fainter somehow, like an old photograph losing its color. I said, "Hang on, the nurse is coming." But before Sarah could arrive, a loud clap of thunder shook the building, and the fluorescent lights flickered off for a moment. When the power came back, the girl was gone. No sound, no trace. The floor was still dry. I ran to the entrance and looked outside. The parking lot was empty, just rain and a few parked cars under the streetlights. No one was there. When Sarah arrived, I told her what happened. She gave me a strange look and said, "Jessica, you're exhausted." No one came in. I insisted, "Let's check the cameras." We went to the monitoring room and pulled up the footage from the entrance cameras. My heart sank. None of the videos showed anyone entering. The door hadn't even opened, but I swore I'd seen the girl, talked to her. Sarah just shook her head and said, "You see weird things at night around here. Best not to dwell on it." But her eyes avoided mine. For the rest of the shift, I felt something lingering in the waiting area, just out of sight. As I left, I caught a glimpse in the glass of the entrance door, a faint shadow of a girl with wet hair, staring at me. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself I was imagining things. But that night, I couldn't sleep. The girl's face, with those hollow eyes, wouldn't leave my mind. 3 nights later, the ER was chaos. A horrific accident had happened on the highway near the hospital. A family of 3 had collided with a truck. The father was dead on arrival. The mother was in a coma, and a teenage girl had survived, but she was in critical condition. When they wheeled her in on a gurney, my breath caught. It was her. The same pale face, the same long black hair, the same white blouse and muddy jeans. But this time, nurses were swarming around her, and her heart monitor let out weak beeps. I grabbed Sarah and said, "That's the girl I saw 3 nights ago." Sarah frowned and said, "Jessica, that's impossible. This family crashed tonight." I checked their file. The girl's name in the records was Emily, 14 years old. But when I saw her photo in the file, my hair stood on end. She was unmistakably the same girl I'd seen in the empty ER. But their accident happened tonight. 3 days after the night, I spoke to her. So who was it that night? What was it? Why had she come looking for a doctor? A few nights later, one of the old security guards, Mr. Romero, pulled me aside. His voice was low, like he didn't want anyone to overhear. "You saw that girl, didn't you?" I nodded. He said, "This hospital, time gets lost in it somehow. Some things show up before they're supposed to happen." I asked, "What do you mean?" He said, "Years ago, another girl died in the ER. Car crash, just like this one. Since then, every so often, someone like you sees her. Always soaked, always lost. Like she's searching for a way out, or for someone." His voice shook, and before I could ask more, he walked away. Since that night, every time I'm on an ER shift, I feel a faint shadow standing in the corner of the waiting area. Sometimes I hear the sound of water dripping on the floor, but there's nothing there. Worst of all, one night while I was filling out forms, I felt a cold hand brush my shoulder. I looked up, no one was there. But in the reflection of the counter's glass, I saw her shadow again, with those same hollow eyes, staring at me. She whispered one word, "Jessica." My heart froze. I ran to the door, but when I turned back, there was only the rain pounding the windows. Now, every night it rains, I feel that girl is still in the ER, still searching for something. Maybe a doctor, maybe an escape. But worst of all, I feel like now that she said my name, I'm part of her lostness. I don't know who she was, or what she was. All I know is that night, when the door opened, something came into the hospital that shouldn't have. The air in St. Augustine Hospital was cold. Not like winter, but a dead, lifeless chill, as if no one had breathed here in years. I, Dr. Julian Mars, 42 years old and a neurologist, stood in the intensive care unit. The smell of ancient mold hung in the corridors, like a library forgotten under decades of dust. 5 days ago, they brought in Leo, an 18-year-old kid, unconscious and in a coma. No accident, no trauma, no medical history. Just one night, mid-sleep, he seized and never woke up. His CT scans and MRIs were pristine, showing nothing wrong. But his EEG told a different story. His brain was lit up in the dream centers, like the visual cortex, with unnatural activity, as if he was seeing something he shouldn't. Leo was in room 412, a cramped space with peeling walls and half-working ceiling lights that flickered weakly. His heart monitor let out faint, uneven beeps, but his face, it was like he was trapped in a void. Sometimes his eyelids twitched, not gently like sleep, but fast and frantic, like someone running from something in the dark. The nurses avoided room 412 from day one. They said when they got near the door, it felt like someone was watching them through the frosted glass in the hallway. But when they turned, no one was there. On the second night, the shift nurse, Ellen, came to me, her face pale as ash. "Dr. Mars, I heard something in 412, like heavy breathing." I rushed to the room. When I opened the door, there was only silence, a thick, suffocating silence that seemed to swallow sound. Leo lay motionless on the bed, but his eyelids were moving faster, as if chasing something in terror. For a split second, in the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a faint face on the wall, like a pencil sketch being erased. I blinked, and it was gone. I checked the EEG. The waves were stronger, like a silent scream pulsing through his brain. I told Ellen, maybe the machine's glitching. I'll check it tomorrow. But as I left the room, I felt something cold, like an invisible finger, brush the back of my neck. The third night, at 3 a.m., I couldn't stay away from room 412. The hallway was dark, with only a broken ceiling light sparking faintly. When I entered, the moldy smell was sharper, and the air felt dense, pressing against my skin. Leo's monitor beeped steadily, but its screen flickered for a moment, as if something was rippling inside it. I sat by his bed and stared at his face. His eyelids moved slower now, but felt like he was fixated on something. Suddenly, a heavy breathing sound filled the room, not from Leo, but from somewhere else, like it was coming from the walls. Then, Leo's eyes snapped open. He stared straight at me. His gaze, it was like a hollow space where something inhuman had crawled in. His voice, a soft but horrifying whisper, like the rustle of dry leaves, said, "It sees me. You can't let it see you." My heart pounded. I tried to speak, but it was like the air had been sucked from my lungs. His eyes closed, and the sound stopped. The monitor resumed its normal beeps, but when I checked the EEG, the waves had gone flat for a few seconds, like his brain had shut off, right when he spoke. From that night, room 412 felt like another place entirely. Ellen said one night, while changing Leo's 4, she felt a faint face watching her from the window's reflection. Not Leo, but something else, with hollow, motionless eyes. One of the security guards said he heard heavy breathing while passing the room, but when he opened the door, it was just Leo. Worst of all, an EEG technician said that when he hooked Leo up, he saw a fleeting image on the monitor. Not brain waves, but a face staring out from a dark place. Shaking, he said, "Dr. Mars, I didn't see it. I shouldn't have seen it." His face was drained, like the image had stolen something from him. I told him to save the EEG file and rest, but I couldn't leave room 412. The moldy smell was now razor sharp, and a strange sensation, like wet, sticky skin, clung to my hands. Leo's monitor beeped weakly, but its screen seemed veiled in a haze, not dust, but a darkness that seemed to breathe. On the sixth night, I decided to run another EEG myself. It was 3:15 a.m., and the ICU hallway was quieter than ever. The stained walls, streaked with yellow and brown dampness, seemed to shift under the dim lights. When I opened the door to 412, a faint hum, like a distant crowd murmuring, buzzed in my ears before cutting off. Leo was still motionless, but his eyelids twitched faster, as if he was sprinting through an endless nightmare. I powered up the EEG and attached the electrodes to his scalp. The monitor began displaying waves, but they weren't normal. They pulsed like veins under skin. Then, in the corner of the screen, a blurry image formed. A face with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched in a silent scream. My heart thundered. I reached to shut off the machine, but my hands froze. The air in the room thickened, and a rustling sound, like papers blowing in the wind, came from under the bed. I bent down to look, nothing but darkness. But when I straightened up, I saw in the frosted window a tall, jagged shadow with edges that seemed to melt. It wasn't human or object, like a painting drawn in black ink, now bleeding across the glass. I blinked, and it vanished. But then I felt something cold, like a wet hand, graze my shoulder. I bolted out and slammed the door. Panting, I could still hear that faint hum in my head. I told Sophie, the shift nurse, "No one goes into 412 until I say so." She nodded, but her terrified eyes told me she'd seen something she wouldn't confess. That same night, while writing Leo's chart, my pen slid across the desk without me touching it. I looked up. No one was there, but in the small mirror on the break room wall, I glimpsed that jagged shadow, staring at my papers from behind me. My blood ran cold. I flipped the mirror over and ran out. By day 7, Leo's condition worsened. His pulse was slower, but the EEG showed his brain was still raging, like a machine running without a driver. Sophie finally broke her silence. "Dr. Mars, last night in 412, something whispered in my ear. It said, 'Don't wake it.'" Her voice trembled, her hand gripping my arm. I asked, "Who?" "Leo." She shook her head. "No, something else." Just then, a soft thud echoed from the hallway, like something hitting the floor. We raced to 412. The door was locked, but when we opened it, Leo's bed was empty. The monitor still beeped, but the electrodes were scattered on the floor. Leo was gone. Panicked, we checked the security cameras. At 3:02 a.m., the door to 412 had opened, but no one stepped out. For a split second, in the corner of the frame, a jagged shadow appeared, sinking into the wall. My stomach dropped. I told the guard to search everywhere, but deep down, I knew Leo wasn't in the hospital anymore. Maybe not even in this world. When I returned to 412, I saw something chilling. On the peeling wall, a thin scratch formed the shape of a face, hollow eyes, open mouth, the same one from the monitor. Then, a faint whisper echoed in my head. "Now you." Since that night, St. Augustine Hospital hasn't been the same. Nurses quit one by one, and guards say they hear rustling from 412 at night, even though it's empty. I stopped taking night shifts, but I can't escape Leo or that jagged shadow. At home, I feel something wet and cold, like an invisible hand brushing my skin. Worst of all, a few nights ago, while reading Leo's file, I glanced at my bedroom mirror and saw it. That jagged shape with hollow eyes, staring at me. It whispered, "You saw it." Now, every night, when I close my eyes, I feel myself being pulled into the same void where Leo vanished. I don't know what that shadow is, or where Leo went. All I know is that night in room 412, something crawled out of his mind, and now it's after me. That was his eyes wouldn't open. A glimpse into the darkness lurking in the halls of St. Augustine Hospital. But the real question is, have you ever felt something watching you in a hospital? Maybe a shadow that shouldn't be there, a whisper in an empty room, or a moment that made your skin crawl. Drop your creepiest hospital stories in the comments below. I'm reading every single one, and the scariest might just inspire our next tale. Don't forget to hit that like button if room 412 gave you chills. Subscribe for more nightmares, and ring the bell so you never miss a story. What's waiting in the next hospital corridor? Stick around to find out, if you dare.